So if we can have our panelists, you know who you are, start making your way up. We are going to combine that now. We're going to have the, Jack Whitty here is going to give a little overview of what the industry discussion was about. And Phil's going to give a talk about the agency group. And then we're going to kind of feed those questions to our panelists. Jack, were you going to go first? Well, I'm going to try to round up some more panelists.
So I guess some of our panel didn't make it. So this is something we tried new this year. So bear with us. I think our industry session went fairly well. So what we did was we rounded up all the vendors, and Judy was there, Phil Rufus was there, and we just kind of discussed what are some of the things that, some frustrations or things we can work with better on the agency side. Then we invited Jerry and Greg over here to yell at them and see what they have to say. But anyhow, I think we had a good session, lasted till about 11:30, came up with some good ideas. And basically what I'll do is I'm going to kind of go over what we talked about, real quick bullet points, and then Phil will go, and then we'll go back and have the panel. We'll go one by one and let you guys kind of answer the questions and maybe see if you have any insight on these topics. First one we kind of came up with was, we're in the pavement preservation, a lot of new products. It was collective, a lot of these products go into research and then they're there. Then the states look at these products and it's research and research and research for years and years when all the states around them have already looked at this and approved them or whatever have it. And 10 states have already researched it, but that state has to continue to look at it. Another one, basically method specifications, more of a performance. If the products meet performance, can they bid on that product? Or bid on that project. I guess maybe staying away from trade names, but if a product can meet the performance, can it be used? Okay, that's two. Must have a process for dealing with new products. Seems like states, it's very difficult to get looked at with new products, and talking about the process and how we can make it easier for these different companies to introduce their new products, because the more new products you look at, the more efficient we could probably be. With that, kind of ties into one more. When we do look at a new product, to really have good communication on testing this new product. And if there's a failure with the product, let's just not dismiss it, but sit down, discuss, and figure out what the failure was. If the industry says this product is going to do 10 things, we go through the testing phase and it only does 5. Let's sit down and figure out what really went wrong. Let's have a post-construction meeting and figure these things out and not just dismiss things. I think there is a lot of people that products have been tested, they do work really well, but for whatever reason on that test with the state, it just did not go right. But there's a lot of success everywhere else, and the state just says, well, this one didn't go right, completely dismissed. That's 3. Issues with communication between agencies and within the agencies. We see, we go to an agency and talk to one district, and we have the central office, and just the communication between that agency just lacks. We see a loss of expertise in the agencies, people retiring early, things like that happening. Again, these are just observations. Obviously, we're not solving these problems right now. This is what we've came up with, and we'll talk about it. One thing we talked about was how do we maybe collectively come together, say the Midwest Partnership or the Foundation or the National Center, and represent us, get some industry involved, but have within the agencies a way to go communicate pavement preservation just to the state agencies, where we can get a big meeting with Illinois or Missouri, we get the higher ups, and we're not necessarily trying to sell products, but we have a group, we go in, we're able to facilitate this on an annual basis, and we talk about pavement preservation with the higher ups, and we get people in there, we get industry, we get other agencies. But having that group together, how can we do that? I think it's kind of the industry putting aside all their differences and coming together for one collective goal. We have to do that, but again, it's not selling one product, but selling the idea, and making sure that not only that everybody in this room understands it, but the chief engineers, the higher ups. Need more money to put into preservation. That was an easy one. We don't have to go there. We all understand that. The last one, I don't know where we can go with this, but when getting states when they design a pavement to really start designing the preservation into the design process. We designed a pavement for the last 10 years. Okay, now let's start designing within that whole process. Maybe you guys are doing it. It's something that came up, but designing pavement preservation into the whole life cycle. Not necessarily making treatments, but we're digging this ground, we're starting the pavement at year 10, we're gonna have to do some type of treatment. At year 15, we're gonna have to do some type of treatment, and having it in there, having it in the budget, and having people understand that the pavement preservation is almost as important as the overlay. And I think that's one thing that we're continually battling with. So with that, I'm going to let Phil talk.
So we'll talk about the top 5 things just because it's not as, and go ahead and review what we talked about, and then again, Jack and I will fire ideas at our panel. Maybe Todd would sit on the panel. So the 5 main things they talked about at the agency panel, which was well attended, were treatment selections on low volume roads, are projects such as chip seals and micros being considered for low volumes and poor condition. There were several responses. We can talk about it in a minute. What processes do agencies use for selecting pavement treatment candidates? Do you have a pavement management system? Do you have a matrix, a decision tree, a described pavement concept? What? Rejuvenators used in both RAP and HMA in spray applied to existing pavements. Another fairly hot buzz topic, especially in my neck of the woods. Who has experience with underseals, such as thin lift overlays or microsurfacing, and have they shown any benefits? This Texas underseal I just kind of learned about last week. We didn't even call it that. And the last thing is crack filling versus routing. When and where, what are agencies doing? MoDOT in my district struggles with that because the price is really different. When do you route and when do you not? When do you heat lance it? So those are the 5 big ones we talked about. Now I believe Jack and I will throw questions at our panel.
So yeah, I introduced the panel. I was unable to round up the other 2 that are AWOL. We've got Jerry Guide from Minnesota DOT and John Singer from Illinois DOT. And the way this is going to work, Phil and Jack are going to kind of lead it off, but we want the audience to participate in this. The idea being whole group participate, so as they ask questions, we want you guys to jump in, give your thoughts, your experiences, maybe spur some questions that you have for how something would work.
Let's get rolling. So you basically said, Todd, we'll go through these, and if anybody else in the panel or out in the audience has questions, we can kind of roll with that too, you think? Yeah. Okay. So let's start with research. I kind of gave the background. We talked about things really getting stuck in research and the idea that, you know, if we're doing researching something in Indiana, if Illinois and all the other states already have researched it and looked at it, why do we have to spend 2 to 10 years in Indiana dealing with this product? I'll open it up to you guys. I just use Indiana as an example because you're sitting there, Todd.
Yeah, I mean, this partnership is a great example of where we would be sharing those ideas. Were one of our panelists up here, he would talk about the task force that he leads, which is looking at specifications and treatments where we've done, I think a couple times now, we've done surveys amongst our member agencies. What do we do? What specific treatments do we have? Share specifications. So I think there are mechanisms through the MP3 to do that.
I do work in research, and I would say MnDOT has a good, very good research department. We also have a very good pavement unit that kind of deals with the specifications and things that happen on construction projects. We don't have an implementation department, and I think to get the idea from research to standard practice is really all of the difficult steps to write up a new specification, non-proprietary, those things take a tremendous amount of time and work. So that's kind of where we run into some of the problems in Minnesota DOT, and the same issue of, researching or new products that have been, proven over and over, kind of runs along that same pattern or timeline of, how do we get it from research to everyday practice? Takes time, takes a lot of effort. I was talking to someone recently and I said, I think MnDOT's, staffed very well for construction in heaven, meaning that when everything's going perfect, we're always moving forward. We're always working on kind of the list you came in to start that day. When the big problem comes up, then the house of cards gets a little shaky.
I agree with what Jerry was saying. The other thing is that sometimes it's not necessarily easy to find the appropriate pavement or site or whatever to use the treatments that you guys are clamoring for. But at the same time, our programs aren't necessarily always fluid enough to make those changes in the final year of the annual program or whatever. There's that difficulty in trying to find the ideal place and time for the treatments, the newer treatments. Say we get a new treatment that comes in, the research from the other states looks good. We also have to be able to train our construction staff. I mean, it's not something that we just want to jump in and kind of give complete control over to whoever. We like to understand everything that we're doing thoroughly on not only design but as well as construction. So
Yeah, I think we talked a lot. We realize you guys are getting bombarded by a lot of different things, and we understand that staffing is not 100%, but it's what everybody, we talked about it, and I think you got some good answers, and appreciate that. Now we'll let Phil go.
One other thing that I want to talk about in this group is that those are good. As I told industry, and I will tell you, especially in the south part of our conference, is why are we here today? One thing that we're going to talk about, and one thing that reflects on this, is we need to do something as a group a little bit better. Yeah, it's going to take a little effort, but as I retire, and as people retire around me, our research staff will go to 1 in December. We need to find a better way, whether it be in these discussions or private phone calls, pick up the phone, call me, call us. As an agency of MP3, what can we do? I think we need to forward saying, you know what, if MP3 signs off it, or somebody else, and we've used it, we need to find better ways to move forward, because there is going to be no more time to research it in MoDOT. There's one person. So I want to be able to steal, my words, something that he's done. So as we move forward and why we're here today, I want you to take your lists, that's how I did it, and write down names of who to contact. Because those might be people in the future where I have a new project or something that Illinois has researched and I didn't know they were doing it, and say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and say MP3 is happy with this, or some other organization, and we're going to go ahead and accept it on those bases. That's what I want to get out.
Phil, you love talking.
Yeah, but I love talking about how we can move forward.
Well, that was a good point, maybe.
I don't fly 545 miles and take 6 hours to get here just to talk about stuff. I want to see these discussions we have over there in the other room. Those actually make sense. And as I'll say it again, I enjoyed sitting in on your meeting, even though I am agency, because I could hear your honest thoughts instead of just hearing the same, well, MoDOT's terrible, blah, blah, blah. I know. It wasn't like that.
No,
But
that was all Indiana DOT.
No, I
think
bashed
it
IDOT.
was.
I mean, I basically threw a grenade in there and attacked them. So, regarding, you really want to talk about, all right, let's talk about chip seals, you guys up here. Treatment selections on low-volume roads. Are you having any victory? I don't have a ton of them in my district, but I'd sure like to hear from John regarding are projects such as chip seals and microsurfacing effective on low-volume roads?
I think the question was also low-volume roads in poor condition. Yes. Illinois is still using and maintaining our low-volume roads that are in poor conditions with the preservation treatments. We have done a better job of distinguishing what we consider to be preservation and what we consider to be maintenance, so that way we can clearly define deterioration models, stuff like that for our pavement management system, and what's federally eligible and what needs to be paid for with state-only funds. While we do use them, we kind of categorize them differently. They are effective at helping maintain these roads at a serviceable level.
I think one thing that I'm looking forward to seeing from the Minroad NCAT partnership and the pavement preservation group is the kind of deterioration curves, the expected life of all the different treatments for both, north and south regions and high and low volume roads. And I really think the important part of being part of this partnership is that we are running ride and rutting, going to start the cracking analysis, but looking at the data on all these treatments, and we're going to be really following these closely and then kind of see the life extension that the treatments give us. I think if MnDOT moves toward more of a chip seal policy on the lower volume roads, something we really haven't discussed, but with funding and things, how do we maintain or hold these together? I think chip seal is going to be a very good candidate. We won't be able to maintain a good of quality ride on those. The chip seal is not going to do a lot to improve the IRI, but it certainly should be able to do a lot to extend the life of that pavement. So to maintain the pavements in there, if you do chip them early, maintain them in good condition longer. If you're chipping them late, it might be hard. You're not going to bring them up to good condition, but hopefully we're going to hold them together much longer.
I think the caveat here, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, is that roads in poor condition, right? So it's the chip sealing roads in poor condition. And I guess I would just throw out for states who maybe are new to certain treatments, be careful using any new treatment as a Band-Aid on a poor condition road, because if you're new to chip seals and you think you're going to go out and do a poor road and really get something out of it, you're probably going to come away with the fact, well, chip seals don't work because you did a bad road and you get bad results. So I think we've done in Indiana, we've been chip sealing almost 10 years now, really heavy. We recognize it's a pavement preservation treatment. Yes, there are times we are going to have to go out and Band-Aid a road. Obviously, the results you get go down with the condition of the road that you're doing. Roads in good condition, you chip seal them, you're going to get really good results. If you do a road in poor condition, you may buy a year or two, but you're fooling yourself if you think you're going to buy a whole lot for doing a road in poor condition.
Moving along, I think we'll go into dealing with new products while we're on. It's probably not something we're solving now, but just kind of throw it out there and see your guys' opinion. But, we talked about when new products get evaluated, if things go wrong, everybody feels like that product gets just thrown to the side. And it's like when a fire gets put out, you investigate. There was an oily rag. Let's investigate what went wrong. Just maybe talk about your thoughts on that. Is there a way to maybe help that? Obviously there might become the point where just the new product just doesn't work, but that's kind of the background on that. Todd, you want to start off?
Yeah, I think, Jack, and you'd mentioned it, communication is very important. If we're trying a new treatment, if an agency feels it has promise, definitely partner with that contractor, that producer, whatever the case may be. What we ended up doing in a lot of cases was we would provide the vendor, coring, FWD, whatever data we had, we would provide to them, and then we would ask in return for essentially a letter from the vendor saying, yes, we've reviewed all this, and yes, we think this is a good candidate for our treatment, and we would proceed. And the reason for that being, how often you try something new, you put it out on a road, and it fails, then the finger pointing starts. Well, that was a bad candidate. That was a bad road. It really wouldn't. No, we're going to go into this openly. The industry is going to certify that yes, we think this is a good use for our treatment. The agency's provided every piece of data that we have, so that we go into it. The results are what they are.
That was pretty good.
I was in a conference a couple weeks ago, and one of the panel members had a similar question. And her boss had asked her, what do you need in order to help turn your system around? And she said, I need the ability to fail. And I thought that was a very good answer, because oftentimes at the DOT, we are so cognizant that we cannot fail, that we're going to get in so much trouble and there will be so much backlash when we do fail. But it's a great opportunity to learn on how to do things differently. So I think as state agencies, we need to be comfortable with failure and make sure that we learn from it. The other thing is we've got an implementation and a new products unit, so we evaluate new products. They go through the ringer. If we're comfortable with it, we try and put it into standard practice. It's one of the nice things that we've got going on in Illinois.
Yeah, and I think on our end, there's a lot on our end we have to do too. We have to be really upfront on what problems can happen as the industry. Really lay out, these 10 things may happen on this project, and that communication on our end I think is going to really help with that. But I like that ability to fail. That's a pretty good line. And thinking about that, being able to communicate that to the district engineers and everybody else is like, hey, we need the ability to fail. So when something does go wrong, they're not doing the finger pointing. That's good.
Well, let me ask a question too then, John. Do we have, and my ignorance is showing, do we have links to that on our website, to your innovations that you were just saying? You've tried this. Is that perhaps something that MP3? Mark?
The things I look at as product studies engineer is, yes, I understand you have a product, you're coming to me. First of all, there are several resources out there. One of them that I believe everyone is the APEL product evaluation through NetPep. I think we're now moving as part of NetPep. It is available to all the agencies as well as vendors, producers, that you can have your product evaluated by APEL. I believe it's a relatively steep entry fee, a $2,500 non-refundable application fee to be evaluated. On the Illinois side, if you as a producer want to submit a product for use in Illinois, you will submit it to the product evaluation unit under the Central Bureau of Materials. Myself and my part-time staff will look at it. We'll decide based upon what you send. We have a variety of criteria that we evaluate if there's a need for it. Is it off the shelf? We are not an R&D department. Yes, I understand that failure happens. When we look at a product, we will work with that producer. We will make sure that we do everything so you don't get to that failure. At the same point in time, we are not your marketing division. If you want to use that product, then you have to convince a contractor to go out and use that product. We will work with that contractor. We will work with that district to find a suitable site to do it. We will do either our product evaluation or our experimental feature process to do the best we can to make sure everything is on an even playing field for that product to be evaluated. That's not on a good, fair basis to evaluate that product. What might work in Chicago might not work in Cairo, might not work in Carbondale. At the same point in time, that also goes to other states. What may work great in North Dakota surely won't work great in South Carolina, Arizona, New York. Those resources are all available to the DOTs to evaluate the product. So yes, while it does take time, I report to the Illinois Highway Development Council. I will submit a product report to recommend either additional lab testing, field testing, or to go directly to our Bureau of Design and Environment to develop a specification based upon what myself and whoever else evaluates that product feel what we need to do with that product. At the same point in time, if we put it out, if everything goes great, you're probably looking at about 2 years for the evaluation process to go from the time we get it to the time there's a check sheet, a supplemental sheet through our Bureau of Design and Environment. If something goes wrong, you might be looking 3, 4, however many years, depending upon if there is a failure, if something does go wrong, what happened. Did it repeat itself for other field trial sites? So while there's other resources out there, APEL, NetPep, other DOTs, once again, what may work at one state doesn't necessarily guarantee it will work at our state, doesn't necessarily it will work throughout the northern part of Illinois to the southern part of Illinois. So we will need, and we will use that evaluation process to look at things before we decide how they move on.
So with that said, one other thing I got from me is I've encouraged, let's use geosynthetics, because that's what I do a lot of. What I ask when I get done doing something crazy, let's say out of the weight scale in St. Charles County using a geosynthetic, is I will ask the contractor and the supplier to go ahead and write a white paper. So I don't know if that's something you all want to think about, but that's how I get my stuff kind of out. We don't communicate well in my division, but if I can get somebody else to write me a paper and say this is what we do, that might be a little bit easier to sell it to the next division. Question 2. I'm going to start with Jer. We heard a lot about Wisconsin yesterday from the gentleman who spoke last. What are agencies, what process are you guys using when you select pavement treatments? Do you have a decision tree, a matrix, timing, expert opinion? I'd like to hear from Jerry because I've seen his decision tree.
In Minnesota, I think I would start with the pavement management system to see what that gives you. Now, if you go through with a new pavement, kind of what Jack mentioned, how do we do preservation after we've built the new pavement? I got a new pavement, I still have a good ride, I'm not hitting any of the stress targets. It says now this pavement's 7 years old. That's when it's going to recommend a chip seal if you're under 10,000 ADT and microsurfacing over 10,000. So our pavement management system says, you know, let the good new pavements stay in place for 7 years. I'm not sure I'm completely comfortable with that, with the aging of binders. When we've gone to the 5834 binder on a newer type construction, FDR type project where all the bituminous is new, we've reduced thermal cracking tremendously from the super paved grading system. So I think if you kind of put that chip seal or micro on a little earlier and you want to slow down the aging oxidation that takes place, you've got to go in there but for 7 years, but 7 years is the kind of pavement management decision tree process. One of our districts, the soils engineer there has worked within the district and he's built some newer type construction projects, and in the contract he has been chip sealing those pavements. He's probably been doing it 2 or 3 years now, so we're going to get some good information on chip sealing brand new pavements there. So I think if you're anywhere in between that, you know, new to 7 years, if you're out there early, you're doing a great job. I'd like to keep, you know, pavement preservation is about keeping pavements in good condition, and I think if I worked in the district, that's when I would treat them as we built them very smooth. When they get to that roughness of 100 inches per mile, they're kind of at the end of, well, there's an end of very good, still good. I'd like to see them, you know, improve that smoothness, get it back to a very smooth ride. We've got some examples in Minnesota of a 20-year-old asphalt pavements that have had a couple microsurfacings on them, and they're still in pretty good condition at that. They might be, you know, 18, 19 years old, but a couple micros, and it's been in good condition its whole life. Interstate 394, which is a big route from Minneapolis out to the west, just recently got a micro mill and ultra thin bonded wearing course on it, and it's almost as smooth as it was, or as smooth as it was when it was opened about 16, 17 years ago. So if you can get in there when the roads are in good condition and spend relatively few dollars, I think you can keep them in very good condition.
I'm
Thanks,
Nicole Andre. I'm with Saskatchewan Ministry of Highways, and I work in our asset management group. So in Saskatchewan, when we're looking at how we're picking our projects, we start with our pavement models are strictly based on conditions, so we don't have age in there. So we look at different types of pavement preservation depending on different conditions that'll trigger it. So our models will say that once we have some rutting up around between 7 and 10 millimeters, then we'll start triggering a microsurfacing treatment. And then we have, for our seal coating, we have a crack measurement. Once it meets a certain number, we'll look at it for a chip seal, and then we have another component of that crack measurement that looks at pickouts and very fine cracking in the data, and it'll find candidates for doing rejuvenator fog seals. So we'll find those as well. And then we do thin lift overlays and our repaving, and it'll be looking at both the rutting and the IRI. We have a lot of actually quite smooth pavements on our high volume roads where we have a really bad cracking problem. So now we're starting to, and this is fairly recent in our models, we made changes because we had roads out there where we had wheel path fatigue cracking happening and they needed to be repaved. We hadn't gotten to them with seals in time, and so we've adjusted the models there now to actually trigger repaving projects for those at those locations. So those are some of the changes that we've been making where the models haven't been, quite triggering the right type of work for us. And so our group, we put together a program provincially on a provincial basis, and that's fairly new. We just kind of reorganized ourselves this past spring. We used to have, we still have 3 regions, and within the regions they all had their own groups that would put together the pavement preservation programs. Now that's all been centralized, so we're doing that on a provincial basis now. So all projects will get prioritized provincially, whereas in the past they were done regionally. So I know in the past the regions programs would actually look quite different, and that was mostly because of the folks putting those programs together. So now there'll be more consistency in the way we're putting our programs together.
So Illinois is still a very reactive state as far as compared to Minnesota and having a prescribed age. Our programming engineers in the district still review every lane mile of roadway via our computer workstations and the data collected with the DCVs. So we go through and based on the distresses that are present on the roadway, determine the appropriate treatments and kind of go through that process. I do like to eventually get to a prescribed timeline-based treatment to be a little bit more proactive. But Illinois is currently going through the process of developing new decision trees and revamping things due to the implementation of our TAM. So we'll get there eventually, but there's lots of changes going on now. So
I guess I would say, talking about what decision matrix we use, it's a little bit of a mix between our pavement management system and expert opinion. We do use DTIMS as our pavement management system, and we do have it set up to generate, we call them thin treatments as a strategy. So that's about as granular as we get there. So a thin treatment would be any surface treatment. It would be chip seal, microsurface, UBWC, or thin HMA. Further, we do have it set up to spit out chip seal candidates, and that's based on the districts have gone through and identified routes that they consider. I think we talked yesterday morning about our chip resurface roads. We've got low volume rural roads that we've identified as we will chip seal those twice, and then 20, 25 years we will resurface them on a cycle. So we know what roads those are. Those are pre-identified. But beyond that, it does take the, I guess, expert opinion, for lack of a better word. It takes the boots on the ground to kind of differentiate between a microsurface, a UBWC, a thin HMA, because they each address maybe a little bit different distresses, right? If you've got rutting, the microsurface is a good treatment. If you've got a ride issue, the thin HMA is a good treatment because we profile mill for that. Generally speaking, a chip seal is our most cost-effective treatment. We can do those fairly quickly. We can do them fairly inexpensively. But yeah, so a combination. Yeah, we want to get, as far as timing goes, we want to get 20 to 25 years. So we generally will come out, and within the first 5 or 6 years of a road being new, we'll chip seal it. We'll try to get 6 or so years out of that, chip seal it again, and then try to get another 8 or so years, to get us that 20 to 25 years.
Issues with communication for 500. So let's dive into, just the communication issues within the agencies, with you guys, and then communicating with the other pieces of the agencies. talk a little bit about that. I know, we're not solving the problem right now. We're not trying to figure out how to fix this, but just discuss it and explore, we talked about the reorganization, losing people, retirement, how to keep that knowledge in the DOT, things like that. And that's one of the things we discussed for several minutes. I'll let you go first, Todd.
So that's a good question, and I'm going to answer a different question. So I do empathize because, another duty, I guess, that I've had historically is impact attenuators. So, we evaluate and approve impact attenuators, and those guys, they work in all 50 states, and there's about 50 different ways that they have to submit their products, that they get evaluated. And so that it drives them crazy. So I'm sure it's the same way. I know you guys don't all work necessarily in all 50 states, but I'm sure you're dealing with a different set of rules for every state. I get that. So as far as communication goes, I guess I can speak to Indiana. It's definitely good to start centrally, because centrally we can keep track of these things. I think John mentioned, you have we also have a new product evaluations committee that would track these products, would keep track of where we're going to use them, where we're going to try them. We've got many stories we can tell where the industry, the salespeople get a little anxious, and so you're dealing with centrally, but then hey, I'm going to go talk to the districts as well, and you end up with kind of chaos when we go that route. We end up with districts putting projects down maybe where they shouldn't be. Nobody's tracking them. Nobody knows that this treatment was done in a specific district. So again, from Indiana, it's better to start centrally. As far as the turnover and the reorganization, that does happen. And I don't know the good answer to that one. So I'll let Jerry answer it.
Yeah, it's good sitting next to Todd, because I agree with everything he said there. The new products is really difficult. For anything in the existing spec, MnDOT probably has a reasonable process. If you have a crack sealant and you want to get on the approved products list, there's a specification, and submit your product and it'll get tested. Concrete patching materials, a similar type of thing that the producer would submit his testing results to that and be on the approved products list. These new items that do come in and are tried in a district or tried in the central office. I think one thing that might help with maybe some agencies is that for all the industry folks that have a product, and especially one that's, as you mentioned, has been tested in other states or approved and used. MnDOT did our first, I'll just say, the J-band application product this year, and Illinois put it down how many years ago, and you're using it 14 years ago. Yep. It works great, so now we're kind of looking at that and testing it, but it's just been one supplier talking to us, and we finally got it down. I'd like to see if industry came in and said, here's the specification we're using in this state or these states, kind of all of the things. Think about the things the department would have to do to get to the success you've had in another state. If you can help us provide links or provide those documents, then we've got a pretty good reference point. Talked about doing a specification for mastic, and there's 3 products I know of. They're very different. And what MnDOT's specification, I think, turned out to be was provide one of these 3 products. Rejuvenators, there's bio-based, there's maltine-based, there's kind of even just straight AC type fog seals. It'd be extremely difficult to make a specification for rejuvenators, but maybe we say, here's the products, use one of these when we believe we're going to get equal performance.
Communication has been identified as one of the major issues in Illinois. Our secretary has been harping on it for the past couple years, and recently it's been brought up that not every district treats every construction specification the same way. So, and there's a lot of district special provisions that override the standard specs. So that has been addressed and will be getting better in Illinois. As far as the communication, we might have a rogue district which will be left unnamed that likes to try out new products without informing central office. We are trying to stay on top of that and keep the lines of communication open. When you get to an organization that's 5,000, 6,000 people, it's hard to stay on top of what's going on everywhere in that state. As far as retirement, it's a gloomy picture. In the next 5 years, I think 50% of the Department of Transportation in Illinois is eligible to retire.
Really?
Yes, so it's not looking good. Based on retirement, it would be wise for them to go before they lose their pension. But at the same time, we've been given authorization to hire as many people as we can. We're hiring, past 4 years, we've hired 1,200 people, but we've also lost 1,200 people. We're not making any headway, even though we're hiring basically one person every day. So it's extremely difficult. We're bound by salaries, and when you got a consultant that's down the road that's offering them 10 grand more a year, it's hard. We're trying. I mean, I'm excited. I got 6 new candidates for a position, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think I'll just build a little bit on what Jerry was mentioning when it comes to bringing new products or new innovations to the ministry. If you do have examples of where it's been working well, or some reports on performance and those kinds of things, those are what I always get asked to produce when we want to look into trying a new product. A lot of times I come back from, well, every year when I come back from these meetings, I do a presentation to my team, and last year I was asked to come into our executive and do a presentation to them on the things I learned and what other folks are doing, and there's always a lot of excitement about it, and then we usually pick a few that, okay, let's try pursuing that and seeing if we can start to bring that into some of the work we do in Saskatchewan. And then eventually, a few months go by, and then the wheels kind of tend to fall off of things. Once in a while, you do it gets traction and it goes. But that's kind of been my experience. And I think a lot of that is around communication. Just in our organization, we just reorganized in the spring, and the idea around some of the restructuring of folks within the regions and within the province was to help with communications, and I'm hoping that'll come, but we're not quite there yet because we just shuffled everybody around, right? So everybody needs to get used to their new roles and positions and how the work they do connects to the work other people do. So that's coming. We had all of our retirements, a lot of those. There's not many people left to retire. So now we have folks in the more senior management positions that don't necessarily have that depth of knowledge or expertise or understanding of who to go talk to about different things. So that's what we're really struggling with right now in Saskatchewan. And I think we're kind of seeing that. Yeah, I guess that's just a few comments. That doesn't really, maybe, but we're working on the problems. We're really aware of those problems. I just got a new manager a few months ago, and she's already left to go to a different position. And on my team, I'm the only person that, we have 8 people on my team. I'm the only person that has been there longer than 3 years. So we're all kind of struggling with that, I guess.
Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, last thing. In MoDOT, communication is not going to get better. I'm not going to paint a negative picture, but the way the aforementioned district that does not communicate with Central, that genre is me. So the way you're going to communicate with MoDOT as we shrink down, you're going to have to find what I define as a champion. And you're just going to, and again, I'm going to go back to the well. It's going to be 2-3 times today. That list that you have in front of you are probably going to be your champions. So if you're concerned, curious, want to move forward, do something with our particular state, you probably need to start with personality, because it's pretty much personality driven. So we're not going to be better. We have 17 positions open at my district for construction inspector. We cannot fill them. So that's not where your communication is going to build. I've had 3 bosses in 5 years. That's not where you're going to build. So you're going to have to find a champion. You're going to have to find somebody who communicates well. And I think social media, stuff like that may also be one of those options we need to start pursuing as engineers.
Since you brought up champion, that was actually one of the things on our list that I really didn't hit on, but
Sorry.
we talked about finding that champion within the DOT and having help with that. Who's that person that can take this to the next level? If we're talking to so-and-so, maybe they can direct us to that right person that can be that champion. And that came up a lot, so I'm glad you kind of brought that
Well
up.
played. Hold on. There we are. We've had 3
I've got 3
discussions.
bosses, Bob.
Yeah, compliments don't come often. On that, to pound it home, why are we here? That's going to be another theme. You also may have these people that join us today making MB3 more and more successive in its mission to open that door. Because there's 3 people I had the opportunity to sit down and eat with that I have an opportunity, I'm going to use that word twice, I'm sorry, to open, because the bureaucracy can look deadly. It can look toughing. But maybe maybe I just went like that, you might have a better sense of ownership in getting into the game. So speaking of ownership, let's talk about what I spend 0.11% of my budget on. Rejuvenators, a small portion of our plan, but definitely seems to be a hot topic in Missouri. So I'd love to ask the panel, rejuvenators for both using rapid HMA and spray applied to existing pavements. Where are we on that?
Well, we've been doing the spray applied, I think we started in like the late 90s, something like that, with our maintenance guys. So they've been doing it. There's a few pockets around the province where they just swear by it and they do it all the time. So as soon as they have a new pavement, they wait 3, 4, 5 years and they'll be out there doing it. We've been trying to get a more of a provincial approach and consistency across the province in doing that. But we still have some districts that haven't done it yet. So it's coming. We do the work internally ourselves. We don't contract that work. So yeah, I guess that's probably, we kind of have that control over picking the projects and where we do that. I've been trying to get them to do the joints on new construction, and that has not happened. I've been trying, for quite a few years to try to get specs into our paving contracts to get the joint sprayed.
Currently, Illinois does not have a QPL for any rejuvenators or anything like that, so we are still under the evaluation period. We would like to be able to better define service life for these treatments, exactly what type of testing that needs to happen in order to define its performance, whether we're actually getting something for our money or whether we're just being duped. There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered as far as IDOT's concerned, and we're getting there. I don't think we've had any other states around that have been officially endorsing certain products or using them solely. So if there are, please send the data our way. We'd like to look at it. There's plenty of opportunities for this type of treatment. We just need to figure out the best way to use it and where to go from here.
In Minnesota, there's been, on the hot mix side, 2 different rejuvenating products that we've had placed during plant production, put into hot mix. Up at Min Road, we just completed a project night paving in October, so it'll be interesting with the rejuvenator. The transitions in the Min Road, as you come in there, you can either go on the old westbound or Min Road. Transitions in and out were pretty beat up, original construction from '92, so we worked with the hot mix asphalt rejuvenator and have a 45% wrap material out there. So I think it's something, and especially in Minnesota with our climate, the -34, which we should be using, and actually the northern third of Minnesota is probably a -40 binder region if you want 98% reliability from thermal cracking. So I think rejuvenators and hot mix has a lot of potential for us. Spray applied rejuvenators, I think on the trunk highway system, my biggest concern is friction, and even in our NCAT study we lost a little friction. And I'm going to say that's probably why chip seals have been very successful, that I think rejuvenators are a little less expensive now. Our chip seal prices are running about $1.85 a square yard. I have to check on some of those, but with the chip seals you get an absolutely fabulous seal and you get good friction. The rejuvenators on the shoulders, I think I'd be using a lot of that. MnDOT also owns, I recently heard, 700 acres of pavement, all our facilities, our parking lots. That should be a rejuvenator playground, but that's the maintenance operations side that somebody's going to have to go in there, and then the operations group is going to have to carve out a little money and maybe try some of these products for these truck stations out in rural areas that get paved every so often. Why not put rejuvenators, on them? I think it's a great idea. So I think rejuvenators, both the spray applied to existing pavements and the rejuvenators and hot mix, is really one of the biggest areas that's coming at the department. And especially one more thing, if I was a local agency where city county or residential street, there's a huge market out there. I think Minnesota lane miles is about the 5th biggest system in the country, so there's an awful lot of low-volume pavements, residential areas that I think the Rejuvenator products are going to really have a big market out there. The tough part is if the DOT has a spec, then everyone likes to use it. So you got to then get our spec.
Phil, I guess I'd say we're all really looking forward to the results of your study, because there's rejuvenators are kind of represent a black box. You know, it's a very, very they're proprietary products. Yes, they have generic specs, but the generic specs don't really tell you anything. I know in my years as the pavement preservation engineer, we did a very robust study into, we did about half a mile to a mile of, it was a very low volume rural road with a spray rejuvenator. We had our research group follow it for I think 3 years. We were, we actually would core the pavement. They would slice off, I think, the upper 1/4 of an inch, about what the rejuvenator penetrates, and they'd extract the asphalt, and then they would do tests on that. And what we found, there definitely was a measurable softening to the asphalt. It lasted about 2 years. And so when we started crunching the numbers, we found that, yeah, there's a measurable benefit, but when you look at the cost of applying it every 2 years, the cost per benefit was just not there compared to more traditional treatments. I guess that's an important thing to any preservation treatment we do. There's a lot of treatments that will do things as advertised, but look at what it's costing us. Is it costing us more than a traditional treatment? As far as rejuvenators and wrap, if we have that in our spec, I'm not aware of it.
So basically what Phil's saying is that with NRRA, there's going to be an additional study on rejuvenators and their performance being applied at a much larger scale than what he's doing in Missouri. More intense friction testing and performance testing, I'm assuming. The spray paver application, not mixed in with the wrap or AC binder.
All we talked about yesterday with the study that we're doing is more of an up or a down concept, Ms. Lay. This study that I'm trying to promote through NRRA and pushing hard with my partners from Illinois and Minnesota, that's going to be a real story, because then we're going to actually see all that data instead of just doing something. We did it because we were receiving big backlash from industry that says this isn't fair, and I said, well, let's go ahead and throw it on the road. So in that study that I appreciate it, Todd, but I think let's downplay it a little bit, is we brought everybody in across the country. We had 17 people that wanted to play, and we had them all in a big room and said, what kind of tests do you want to do? So it's more of an industry-led study. And then we threw it out there, and we're testing for permeability, skid testing, et cetera, by a third party, ARA, from Champaign. So let's talk about something different. Jack?
Let's go into the collective meetings with the state agencies. This is something we talked about maybe through the foundation or our national center, getting a group of maybe industry and agency together to go meet with the states. We'll see where this goes. Meet with the states, meet with the higher ups, with the decision makers to really focus on pavement preservation. This is not an opportunity to go sell product A or product B, but I think we feel like as an industry that the pavement preservation just isn't important, especially in the hierarchies of the DOTs, and having that ability to get in front of them on a regular basis with some industry people and get help from you guys to set those things up and to have a panel or have a presentation to kind of dive into the benefits of preservation, start really drilling in the importance. Preservation is as important or as important as the overlay. We get the overlay now where the equal importance is keeping this preservation, and we don't feel like maybe it's being broadcasted to the hierarchy and all the districts. See what you guys have to say. It's kind of hard to explain, but this is what we talked about.
In Minnesota, that's a very good idea, because in Minnesota, the Minnesota Asphalt Paving Association and the Concrete Paving Association, I believe, has quarterly meetings with top staff. There is no, surface treatments pavement preservation group out there. If there's a way to get a group together within each state of the agency and a couple of the MnDOT people, I think at the MnDOT meetings, it's really kind of top staff. I'm not even sure if there's just anyone even in our Office of Materials that maybe our director attends those, but I don't hear anything about them, and I'm not sure what they're doing, but
Yeah.
the idea for pavement preservation is terrific.
So there's a couple opportunities here. Illinois does a technical working group with industry and the state experts for both HMA and concrete. And I feel like it would behoove industry and the state agency to work together and create a separate one for pavement preservation. It's mainly to iron out the details that have, and issues that both have had throughout the year, see what we can do together to work better, and solve the issues at hand. Also, there's basically 2 seasons in Illinois. There's construction season, and then there's conference season. So during conference season, we have our ACPA, we've got our APA conferences, and some others, engineering conferences at the U of I. A preservation conference where we could gather the district personnel and central office personnel that are mainly handling these treatments, and let them sit through presentations from industry and from other states if we need be. And that way we have a forum to talk amongst ourselves within the state, figure out where we're going with preservation, what worked in one district, what didn't, and get more education and training throughout the state would be a very beneficial thing.
Did you have a bit of a conversation on what that could look like in Canada at all, or was it mostly just focused, not so
I
much?
think we forgot about Canada.
Well, I think what I could say.
In general, I think it's
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
in our partnership, this is just a discussion.
Yeah,
So we kind
yeah.
of, I think maybe this would be a group of people within the partnership that falls under the Midwest Pavement Preservation, or say the National Center, that goes to each state, whether it's 6 people in this room, and now we're going to Illinois, Minnesota, and we're meeting with them to talk about it. Maybe not each individual state, but start there and we go up to Canada.
Yeah,
But,
well, we'll kick it around a bit, because we're, Saskatchewan's hosting the Canadian Asphalt Technical Conference next week. There's folks in the room from Canada here that will be there, so we can keep talking about it.
We have a little time left. I'm going to only get 1 left from me. I don't think we're going to hit all 5. So I'm going to talk about number 5 instead of 4. Crack filling versus crack routing. What are you guys doing? I told you earlier what MoDOT does. We have 2 specs on it because we love specs. But when I issue stuff in maintenance contracts, I'm going to go ahead and let them just hot lance it instead of routing it. But I want to hear actually, why don't we talk to you again? Let's hear what Saskatchewan does. Routing versus crack filling, your thoughts in general.
We should do a lot more of both. My thoughts in general. We contract out all of our routing, and the filling we do with our own crews, but it's really left up to them to put that and plan that in their maintenance plans. And there's not many of our crews that are actually doing the crack filling. When we get to the larger cracks, like the depressed cracks, we have a couple provincial crews that do. We have a transverse crack machine unit that we built that uses a micro slurry, and so it goes and it can treat those depressed transverse cracks with that product. And then we also have equipment. It's sand sulfur equipment, and we do a similar kind of treatment with that. So we have a few crews that run around the province and do that kind of work. So there's definitely have districts that don't pay attention to treating their cracks. So.
Would have to say that Illinois probably does a lot more crack filling than crack sealing, just basically due to the time of crack sealing operation. Plus, Illinois' guidance on the difference between the two is rather vague and kind of shifts back and forth between specs and design manuals and stuff like that, so that really needs to be cleaned up. We've had certain districts that did not believe in crack sealing, and you can tell by the condition of their pavements. Districts that were on top of crack sealing at an early age and kept up with it throughout the years, their pavement condition is in a lot better shape, and they've had more flexibility with their money as far as being able to do higher treatments and keep their overall network at a higher level. You can definitely tell when you cross the district border between one county and the next, and it's a stark difference even on the same road. It's something that Illinois needs to do more of, and we definitely need to look at utilizing both to help maintain our roadways.
Phil, on your comment or question, was it more along the line of what do you think we should be doing, or is it cost effective? So the counties in Minnesota are doing a research project right now because the county engineers wanted to know whether they should route and seal a transverse crack or just fill it. So that type of, which is more cost effective. University of Minnesota Duluth is kind of looking at that there, and actually what they found just looking at a few projects that were recently done, so we're up in Duluth and, you know, north of that area, the route and seals had quite a lot of failures in the first 2 years. So those cracks moved too much. We have so if you route and seal a transverse thermal crack in Minnesota, we have a very low modulus material that's supposed to expand 200% when tested at 20 below zero in the lab. So we use a very low modulus material. They're kind of asking the same question, what's more cost effective? I think, my opinion, if I had a transverse thermal crack, a straight one, and could route it, I would probably likely route and seal that one. Longitudinal cracks, when you get bad joints, wheel path, we don't route those. We just kind of fill them with a different type product, a little less expansive. So one thing we've seen in the NCAT MnDOT study is that just a simple filling cracks prior to chip or micro seems to be performing very good. And we talked a little about that in the agency session, that do a crack treatment a couple weeks, a couple months prior to a surface treatment.
Yeah, this is a good question, and I guess I'll start out by referencing, we had previously done most of our crack filling with emulsions, and we didn't feel like that was the right answer. So we did a fairly robust study. It was a 2-year study. We followed it over 2 winters. We did a couple test roads, northern Indiana, southern Indiana. We were looking at emulsion versus all different kinds of hot pour, you know, the traditional type 2, fiberized, straight PG grade. And you might imagine the results of that study were a little bit all over the board, but there was a marked performance difference we could see between the emulsions and the hot pour. So we made the decision we're going to go with the hot pour. We did also look at routing in that study. The results for routing versus non-routing, I guess it would depend on which side you wanted to take. You could probably make the results tell you whatever answer you wanted. It was not a marked increase in performance. I know that Illinois did a study really looking hard at routing and sealing. We ended up talking to the author, routing versus non-routing, and he convinced us that yes, in the composite pavements, the transverse joints, there was enough movement that if you did not route, there wasn't enough. There was so much movement that just an overband wouldn't absorb it. So you should route. Now in reality, Jerry mentioned this. How many times has anyone gone out on a composite pavement and seen a single transverse crack? Anybody? They don't happen very often, right? They're braided. There's multiple cracks. So we try to tell our crews to go out and route those. They'll route down the middle, you know, and put a seal in it, but you've got all these other braided cracks, the secondary cracks that aren't touched, or worst case, they'll try to route them all, which just makes a complete mess. So in Indiana, we pretty much made the decision that the incremental benefit for routing is not worth the added effort, the added complexity, safety issues. You know, it's not easy to route a crack. And Clint mentioned yesterday with all the new silica safety standards now, we would have to go back and either retrofit or buy new routers that were the filter, the vacuum ones, and we just made the decision that it's just not worth routing. So as of, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, we pretty much abandoned routing.
Okay, my question after the discussion about the turnover in the department, so many people leaving, and then new treatments and new research and so forth, I'd like to know from the agencies here, how many have a pavement preservation training program that they implement for the districts and so forth, so people are all on the same page? I think it'd be interesting to find that out.
Maybe Claire, that's a really broad question. Do you want to?
Well, I think that, you know, this whole issue we're talking about with pavement preservation and then failures out in the field and new people coming on board and not understanding how these treatments work. And we're not necessarily talking about the new treatments. We're talking about things like chip seals and microsurfacing and, you know, then bonded overlays and so forth. So there has to be a transfer of knowledge somewhere. And if we don't have that transfer of knowledge, then we can't expect good results. So my question is, how many agencies have really implemented a training program internally where they transfer that knowledge to their staffs? Because we all know that there are pretty robust asphalt or hot mix training programs within a department. There are pretty robust concrete training programs in the department, that those that have concrete. So my question is, how many agencies actually have some sort of robust training program for pavement preservation treatments? And I think that'd be interesting to go around the room and get agency feedback on that.
We'll just start here. Thank you, Larry. And it really started maybe a couple years ago, just listening to your discussions and the certification program that NCPP has now on chip seals, crack filling as one and microsurfacing. We have broached that topic now with our construction division because of the things that have been stated at this meeting and at other previous meetings, that again, there's just lack of knowledge, maybe not only by our inspection staff, but maybe new contractors coming into that field as well. So on both sides. So we've got the discussion started in Missouri, trying to figure out how we would put in some type of requirement on a contract or incentive on a contract that we would require or incentivize those contractors that are certified to do that type of work, let's say chip sealing or microsurfacing or crack filling. I think that's the three that were the top three. And in a similar way, bring that certification program into our in-house crews that do that work. At least in our case, it would be chip sealing. Definitely, we're very interested in the certification program. I know you're going to have a test later today. I'd like to see, and I think there's some people here that will be taking that test today, and like to bring that back to our state and talk a little more about it, and then maybe just how we can get that started. I know I've talked with John too. Maybe we could get at least between Missouri and Illinois, kind of a partnering, if you will, because I think we share some of the same contractors along the Mississippi River that work on both sides of the river, and that would be at least a little start there. And I think others here in the room might be able to work on some partnerships between some common states and common geographical areas that may share some of the same contractors for those types of work.
Out of the states, anybody else like to stand up and talk about that? Or
I'd like to hear from Michigan.
Andy Bennett, Michigan. Yeah, I would say it's a challenge that we have in Michigan. We really discuss the need for training. Like Larry said, I think we've got robust training in both our HMA and our concrete areas, but I think we need to do a little bit more in the preservation area. We did have an organization at MDOT, the Michigan Road Preservation Association, so it's an industry partner group, which we did some training on a rotating basis to the regions that I think helped a lot, but that's kind of gone away, and we're not doing as much of that now. I think there's a great need, but the MDOT folks are just part of it because we do so much consulting now. So we have consultant inspectors on a lot of our projects. We just don't have the staffing right now, so that's another challenge, is how do we get the training to those folks, or what requirements should we put in place for some of the consultants that are overseeing our projects? Because I've been on projects and the consultant doesn't know anything really about the fix that they're overseeing. Just speaking for Michigan, I think there's a great need to do more in that area.
I know Illinois's got HMA and concrete and aggregate classes at one of the local universities that was developed by the Department of Transportation, is offered for the designers and district staff to gather knowledge on that. At dinner last night with Mr. Peshkin, we had talked about bringing this stuff up to date for preservation and creating these classes for our staff for preservation and for IDOT. I've had a lot of discussions with district staff, both in the office and out in the field, that they're just clamoring for more information. They need to know what's going on. I think this would be kind of a two-headed approach in Illinois. Both develop the training classes for the designers and the people that are picking the treatments, and then develop specific task training for the field personnel, so that way they know what they're inspecting, they know how to calibrate the machines, they know exactly what industry should be doing in the field. That's something that I'm going to look into bringing into Illinois, and hopefully catch a lot of the newer engineers that are coming in and get them trained in preservation.
Rick Rowan, South Dakota bituminous engineer. At one time, we had a rather robust, where we were doing in-house chip sealing, crack sealing. We had our own training courses. We went away from that. So now to get training out, we're using Transportation Learning Network. We've got 4 states in that. We bring in somebody for chip sealing, crack sealing. We also train our own maintenance forces. In the winter, we call it most training. There's a little slide on it. We bring them in probably 30 to 60 a year. We go over the stuff they may do and tell them how we want them to do it. And then we also, we've used through counties. We went to some of the county meetings and had training. But we realize that we've got to do more. It's a mess when you watch some of them do their own chip sealing. You just cringe. So there's a lot of work to be done. We know that, and we'll have to get something out there. And we need the certification and testing side, not just having them go to a class where they know they don't have to pay attention and learn versus take a test that shows they learn it is a big difference.
Saskatchewan, your turn.
Well, I'll be quick. We don't have any formal internal training. We do some ad hoc stuff, but last time we did that, I think, was 2016. We did a seal coating seminar, and it was a very good one, very well done. We pulled in, it was ourselves as well as our contractors and our asphalt suppliers came together, and we opened it up to like the local municipalities as well as the cities to come in. So it was well attended. We sold out very quickly, so I think there's an appetite for that kind of information and training to be available in Saskatchewan. It's just we just haven't been able to kind of pull it together and make that happen. So.
Actually, I have two things. A lot of discussion already about routing and sealing or crack sealing in general and so forth. And I know that Craftco reps are here. I'd be interested to hear what they have to say. Maybe I'd put them on the spot, perhaps, maybe I shouldn't, in that regard. On the NCAT work that was done on the low volume road on Lee Road, and you look at what was blow and go versus route and seal, there's a significant difference in performance. And as a result of that, I'm not so sure that not routing is a good idea, but I would be interested in if Craftco has any comment about that. Secondly would be, at the industry meeting, there was the issue of proprietary products that came up. There's been a lot of discussion about new products and new product development and so forth, but proprietary products in particular was discussed for some period of time. Just wondered if you wanted to throw something out on that.
We discussed a little bit about proprietary products, and there is federal memorandums out that do allow states to have a process to use proprietary products. And yeah, we did talk about that at length. We probably don't want to get into it too much. We've opened up for questions. That is one thing we did discuss. Being able to use proprietary products, having that process and having that champion that's going to push it through that process. And I know it's a difficult thing to do, but like Phil said, having that champion to get through it is probably one of the keys.
Right, and to continue that, and I'm going to go to them. I'm going to answer this question a little bit better.
Okay.
AASHTO was in St. Louis last week, and I told you, I think this last night. The people that came and talked to us in an intimate setting here in District 6 said, this type of an organization, and we'll talk about that in the business meeting, it's about time we start writing letters in our support of these concepts. So if there's rules, the quote was from Eric, if you want something changed, now is the time. So if we don't like some of these rules, we could come together with, again, this communication thing we're working on, and perhaps even with Jack in command as our vice chair, begin writing letters of support. Hey, man, we don't like this rule. That's the answer I want to make sure everybody heard. Let's talk about routing. Craftco?
All right, my name is Chris Stebbing. I'm with Craftco. I've been with them for almost 7 years. And I am a former city-county person, so I've been around this my entire career. A lot of times the misconception is really when we're talking about how it was brought up, routing versus crack filling, that's not exactly the way it should be brought up, okay? Crack sealing versus crack filling would be a little bit more accurate. The misconception is that when you route, anytime you route, you are crack sealing, and that's not always the case because it really comes down to product selection sometimes. And the difference between crack sealing versus crack filling, your objectives are a little bit different. With crack sealing, we're trying to keep the moisture out, obviously. but we're also trying to give the best potential of expansion and contraction, keep those incompressibles out, whereas crack filling, yes, we want to keep the moisture out, but we also want to add some structure, some strength to try to hold together that pavement a little bit longer. So it really comes down to the product selection sometimes. You can go out on a crew and route all day long and use the wrong material on that job, and you're going to have failure. Some sealants will bond better to a routed reservoir versus just a blow-and-go application. So, I mean, we manufacture almost 300 different types of sealant, you know, various regions and climates and so forth. And most of the time, every DOT has anywhere from 3 to 5 different sealants that they spec out, all ASTM type sealants. I just want to stress the fact that we really need to look more at crack filling versus crack sealing. The routing, there's been numerous studies of the routing over the years. Kind of the rule of thumb is for a typical crack sealing operation, if it's blow and go, you're going to get 3 to 5 years of life out of that sealant. If you route, you're typically going to get 7 years plus. I mean, that's not a Craftco study, that's been a federal study. There's been several studies over the years, so it's not just us advocating it, but it's been proven time and time again that the routing is in fact beneficial and it is cost effective. I don't want to give a pitch, I can do that too, but.
We're just wondering if you guys came up with any direction for motorcyclists and crack sealant. We're getting some feed or kickback that they lose a little traction or whatever when they're going through curves or whatever. Have you guys as a company come up with any suggestions on that?
Paul, I still have my motorcycle, just so you know. Haven't sold that yet because of the crack sealant out there. But really what happens more than anything, it has to do with the application. You know, when we're talking about an overband looks great out on the road. Is it done properly all the time? Not really. Sometimes the overbands are a little excessive. Sometimes they're maybe using a squeegee and pushing it along, but they're not putting any down pressure on it, so it's not a real tight overband. And any of that extra material over the top is going to make it slippery. When we further that with a low modulus product, it's going to be very flexible, very soft as well. So on hot days, if you've got an excessive overband with a very soft sealant, it's going to be a little snaky when you hit it with a motorcycle. As well as on rainy days, even our mastic products, if they're put down where the aggregate will sink down into the base of that patch and you have more of the binder on the top and you drive over that when it's wet, you can definitely have some traction issues. But as far as specifically coming up with any other type of sealant to address that, not really. Just try to keep the overbands, you know, tight and not as wide. They don't need to be 6 to 8 inches wide. Not that we don't want to sell sealant, but it's overkill and it's not helping you.
A lot of, when you consider a route versus filling, you have to understand the cross-section here, because not all cracks are going to act the same, right? So a composite pavement, a crack coming through that's going to act a lot different than a full-depth HMA. Part of that decision to do that, I think you really have to understand the cross-section that you're working with. Like on a concrete pavement, if you've got, depends on what your pre-repair was. If you've got good straight, if you've done full depth repairs and the crack comes through in a straight way, then I think you can route that crack and you're going to get more life, because you also are going to get more thermal movement with those composite sections. So I think that's important when you're doing test sections as well, and evaluating the test section is to really understand what kind of pavement you're working with.
Chris, as was mentioned earlier on the routing, on your tooling for routing and to try to get in compliance with OSHA on the silica net, do you have any innovations there for your routers to kind of keep to capture the silica or the potential for silica, I guess, as we route?
Chris, maybe do it. Again, my name's Mike Post, Craftco. But the answer is yes. Come see us at our booth. We've got a dust control router that helps minimize the silica dust. very well. We also have a larger piece of equipment called a crack vac that blows and cleans cracks as well. Not necessarily as much as a silica issue when you're blowing and going like that, but it does vacuum as well. But we do have a dustless router that, to help minimize the silica issue, so thanks.
Again, this is the first year we've done it. Sorry we couldn't get all the questions. Probably will help out next year, leaves more time for questions. Want to thank the panel. Guys did a good job. Want to thank Phil Rufus for running this microphone around.
We'll see you back here in 2 and 2.
What's that? 10:30.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.